Thank you for joining us and welcome to our Urban Collaborative Collab Talk. My name is Richika Chopra and I'm joined here by my colleagues Lauren Katzman and Catherine Benedict. Today, we will be facilitating this collab talk. We will keep an eye out for questions that you may have for our presenter and answer any urban collaborative related questions. So please, as you're listening today, write your questions, thoughts, ponderings, show your appreciation of what is being shared. Let us know if you have incorporated some of the work that is being shared and have encountered some roadblocks. And please share if you've had successes. We call our time together today Collab Talk because we want to spend this hour with you talking and collaboratively learning. Let me remind you that we will be recording this session and will have it available for you or your colleagues to review after today. Today, we have the honor and privilege to welcome to our Collab Talk Dr. Gholdy Muhammad. Dr. Muhammad is an associate professor of literacy, language, and culture at the University of Illinois in Chicago. She has previously been a classroom teacher, literacy specialist, school district administrator, curriculum director, and school board president. She studies Black historical excellence in education, intending to reframe curriculum and instruction. She has received numerous national awards and is the author of the best-selling book, Cultivating Genius, an equity model for culturally and historically responsive literacy. She also co-authored Black Girls' Literacies, an edited volume. Her newest book, Unearthing Joy, is a sequel to Cultivating Genius and provides a practical guide for putting culturally and historically responsive education into curricular practice. Her culturally and historically responsive education model, which we'll be hearing about today, has been adopted across thousands of US schools and districts across Canada. But before we start with our conversation with Dr. Muhammad today, just wanted to quickly share that we have opened registration for our Urban Collaborative Spring Meeting, which will be held in Portland, Oregon in April. Please register and plan to attend. We look forward to seeing you all there. Also, check out our recordings of past collab talks, as well as collab PDs on our website, as well as on our Instagram page, Urban Collaborative ASU, and click the link in the bio. Again, we welcome you all today to our Collab Talk session, Genius and Joy, Culturally and Historically Responsive Literacy with Dr. Gholdy Muhammad. Dr. Muhammad, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor and a joy to be with you all. Thank you to all the beautiful advocates and leaders of Urban Collaborative. You all are doing such amazing work. And sometimes when, the field gets a bit overwhelming and you get a little deflated when you see what happens across the nation sometimes and in schools. But when you see organizations like this really lift children and elevate children and center their genius, their brilliance, their needs. It gives such an amount of hope and joy. So I want to say thank you to you all. So I'm going to get started here. All right. All right. I think we can see that okay. We're going to talk about genius, justice, and joy. And in a brief time, what does these three concepts really look and feel like in a model? While we understand the need for them and the need to better educate children, a lot of times we've had incomplete models. Sometimes our models have only focused on skill development or cognition or the science of reading and not context, not identity, not consciousness, not joy. What does it look like when we have a more inclusive model? So I always ask this question, and in 30 seconds, I want to ask you all too, if you can open up the chat and just answer this question any way you like, any way you're feeling. How's your heart? How are you doing today in this moment? Are you feeling full? Are you feeling overwhelmed? It's also December. We're getting closer to that break. How's your heart? If you can just open up the chat and answer that question. Just take about 30 seconds or so to do so. However you're feeling, just be in it. And we're going to give ourselves grace and patience of whatever we're feeling. So we're better now that I'm here talking about joy. Yeah, a bit bruised and tired. Yes, I get it. Sometimes just showing up in spaces that don't always see us, know us, love us, recognize us can make us feel that way. My heart is filled with gratitude, busy but grateful for some deep, deep rest. Yes, I get that. It's different than regular rest, it's deep. In the moment, I'm at peace, excited, and tired at the same time because two things can be true. So, yes, keep responding, you all, and keep just being in the space that you're in. I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes. I'm going to see if I can time myself because y'all, those who hear me talk, sometimes I'll start telling stories, but I won't do that. I'll talk for about 20 minutes. And then also, then we'll move to some engagement with you all. So about 30 minutes of questions you might have for me, or just some ideas, some engagements from what I've said. And then we're going to close with joy. We're going to open with centering our hearts, and then we close with joy so that I leave you with what is joy? What's the sense of joy? And why do we need to fight for joy in the classrooms? In my 20 minutes, I'm going to really focus on these two things. How do we really recognize our students as geniuses? Sometimes our students are called everything but a genius, all the things the system may have called deficit words and labels. How do we start with genius? And I'm going to review the model that I think many of you might be already familiar with of my books. And how do we approach this model with students with disabilities, particularly? Now, in my latest work of Unearthing Joy, I really go through 5 major pursuits of teaching and learning, identity development, skills, intellectualism, criticality, and joy. Those are the 5, and I'm going to go through those with you. Those are the 5 we teach with students with disabilities. Those are the 5 we teach from pre-K to 12 in math and physics and science and all the things. And so in my book, I really first start with the need to center genius and joy. And what is joy? What does it look and feel like? How do we unearth ourselves and focus on the self? Because we know we cannot do the work for children if we don't do the work for ourselves first. And then what does it look like with curriculum and assessment? What are some practical and useful um, ways you can enact the work? Because we don't want to leave with just understanding theory and history when you go to professional development or classes. We want to leave with something in our hands that we can use today, tomorrow, right away. And so I'm really asking, how do we, as a follow-up to Cultivating Genius, my first book, how do we implement the teachings from it? How do we move forward in a practical way with joy as the goal? So I want us to picture a school where the purpose of going to school, the purpose of teachers being hired, the purpose of children being educated was for joy, not for to pass a test, not to hit a benchmark. Okay. That's not the ultimate goal. Those are goals, not for graduation. What if the ultimate goals for school was joy? Was that children would experience joy, would recognize joy, would learn how to claim and reclaim joy. When teachers walked in, joy flowed through their body. That's how they knew they were at the right workplace. What if the purpose of education was joy? See, that's a different orientation, you all. Everything that we do in pedagogy, everything we do in assessment, in our standards, in our curriculum, in our teacher eval, all of it will look different if joy was the ultimate goal. See, that's what I'm arguing we need to get toward. Because if children are not safe, if they are not well, if they don't have peace, this is all joy. Joy is not just having fun. Joy is wellness. Joy is healing. Joy is when you can walk into a space and feel like you can live out your fullest dreams and your potential. That's what joy offers. What if that was the goal? That's what I start with. And who are our students, you all? It's simple. They're geniuses. They're bright. They're brilliant. They each have unique gifts and capabilities. Sometimes we focus so much on their disability, we don't focus on their ability. We don't focus on who they are and what they can do. I would ask teachers to tell me about their students who they struggle to educate the most. And typically it was Black and brown children, children with IEPs, and children who spoke multiple languages. And you might have a child who fits all 4 of those categories. And I would say, tell me about them. And they would say they're struggling. Oh, they can't learn the content. They're at risk. They're unmotivated. Y'all heard these terms before? I would say, no, tell me about your children with IEPs. And every time I heard something negative or deficit, I would ask again, tell me about your children with IEPs. Tell me about your children with IEPs. Nobody introduced their own sons and daughters in certain ways. But for some reason, when it comes to other people's children, it was like deficit. See, we are here to start with who our children are, what they can do, and their geniuses, what they're good at. I would have children, and some of them were children with IEPs or children with disabilities. They could like take things apart and put them back together. Genius. They could read the words as well as they could read the images, as well as they could read me up and down. Genius. I had children with disabilities who could make me smile, make anybody smile. They had such an emotional intelligence that was off the charts. I had children who had emotional intelligence and joy. Their joy was exceptional. I couldn't understand. You ever meet somebody where they have an exceptional level of joy? That's genius. I had students who could create language and freestyle and rap and make it rhyme in the matters of seconds. That's linguistic genius. I had students who could double dutch, who could braid hair. Genius, genius. See, not all times are children's joy even the focus. We don't assess their joy. We don't recognize and honor all the ways that they're a genius. Now, when I asked you all, just take a look and take in some of these responses. We asked you all, how do you define genius? How are your students genius? Look what you said. Just take it in for a second. They come with Black brilliance. It's their spirit that's genius. Yes. Their creativity is genius. They come with genius from birth. It's their ability. They can observe. They can notice things. They have a sense of humor. Isn't it genius to have a sense of humor and to tell stories and jokes and laughter, to make somebody laugh? What a gift. Their kindness is genius. They are so resilient. Their resiliency is genius. Some of us, we fall apart. We spilled our coffee. We're done for the day. They're geniuses. They come with unique forms of reading and navigating the world and cultural wealth as genius. Yes, y'all just nailed it with these answers. They are a genius in unlimited ways. There's so many ways they're genius. This person said, I cannot even describe them all. They show up, they make connections, their vulnerability, all the ways they're genius. And those of you who know my work, I say a child's genius is like a flower. We do not give a child their genius, and we do not give a flower its beauty. It just needs to be grown and cultivated. But if you look at children like you look at seeds, little brown seeds that are getting ready to be planted, and if you don't see the beauty in the color and the petals, you have to see it, imagine it in your mind, and you have to believe it. You have to believe that with the right type of growth and water and cultivation, that those seeds will grow, that they will blossom to be beautiful, to be rich in color. But you have to believe it, because if you don't believe it, you're not going to give it the right soil, sunlight, and water. Y'all with me? Children are the same way. If you look at them and you don't see their genius and you don't really believe it, your watering is going to be raggedy. You're teaching. You're not teaching them because you don't believe in their growth. And then a lot of people say, oh, the students are, disengaged, but you're not saying why they're disengaged. You're not saying how. You're not giving this other narrative. They think the nature of children is to be disengaged and unmotivated. No, their nature is to bloom, just like the flower. Now, we have to be careful because sometimes children bloom against the elemental crush. They bloom against a system, against policies, mandates that were never fully designed for their growth. They bloom like a song of color for deserving eyes. That's us. And if we sit on interview committees, we are making sure that we are hiring colleagues that also have deserving eyes. Y'all know what I mean by that. A flower blooms gloriously for itself, but sometimes they have no say. How can children learn for themselves, but they have no say in the curriculum, the policy, the standards? Some of the meetings we come into and problem solve, we don't ask them, we don't center their joy, their hearts, their voices first. So this work is really interrupting these narratives that we hear, that we say, that we think about children. I don't call children any of these things because they have not moved the field forward. We have not focused on their abilities, their talents, their gifts, their genius. And some of this so-called achievement data tells us nothing. It doesn't tell us what contributed to the scores, the truancy, whatever the data is. I ask myself, do we have struggling students or struggling instruction, struggling system? That's a different orientation. Do we have an unmotivated child or unmotivated lesson plan? I don't even say children can't read. It doesn't sound like I'm a professional when I say that. I say what they struggle with. And then I ask myself, how am I making it impossible for them to fail as a teacher? I don't get mad when they come to me struggling academically. Can you imagine if my ear, nose, and throat doctor got mad every time I went into her office and I said I struggled breathing? She doesn't get mad at me. She doesn't blame my parents. All she does is help me. But some educators get upset. No. And not that I'm implying that children are sick or they got breathing problems. I'm just making an analogy that all we must do is help and lift and elevate. So calling children these things, this is a starting point. I don't call children non-white. I don't call children minorities anymore. I just say children of color or Black children, brown children, because I don't like the word minor in it. I don't like the word subgroup. And when we know who children are, we are then best prepared to teach them. And the best ways that I found in my work to teach in culturally and historically responsive ways is really readapting the dress, the curriculum. And I use this analogy, and I'm sure this is going to come out in our Q&A. If we focus on how we teach, what we teach and how we teach, it's really the dress. We are the hands, the seamstress. But sometimes we get textbooks and curriculum programs that are not always sewn or designed by people of color, people of consciousness, people who have taught special education. They are writing curriculum for us, but have never been in it. And they give us the curriculum, they give us the dress, and the dress looks nice, it looks pretty. But when children can't fit the dress, we say, oh, maybe they need a diet. Maybe they need an intervention plan. Maybe it's the dress. Because we're going to talk about what it means to have a better dress, a better curriculum, a better instruction for our students. One that has quality fabric, quality text selection, that is beautiful. It has the best among us because, teachers will do everything we will to manipulate a dress. We'll take a lesson plan, we'll chop it up, cut it up, we'll make it work. But I'm going to show you this model of 5 learning goals that will sort of re-envision the dress, where we're not just seeing curriculum as a set of materials or packaged set of things. We're seeing curriculum as the world around us. That's what we teach children. We're teaching them the world. We're seeing curriculum as not just a set of packaged materials, but the stories we teach and tell. What stories matter? Whose stories matter? We're teaching students curriculum as legacy building, setting an imprint. And we're providing ideas in curriculum that unearths the things that we have concealed or pushed down. I didn't learn about people and scholars and heroes who had disabilities growing up. I didn't learn about Indigenous heroes. There was so much I did not learn. And as a result, our students come out of schools with these viewpoints and these perspectives that are very limiting, that can be filled with falsehood or incompleteness. And so those of you who know my work, I study history, I study the past, I study organized learning groups called literary societies to understand how did they read, write, and think and engage together. They had this each one teach one philosophy. It wasn't this thing where we ability grouped historically among Black people. We didn't put people in ability groups. We said, if you have something I don't have, put us together. We teach each other. And we engaged in literacy and mathematics and science and history in these literary societies. They provided for me the guide, a roadmap of how we can rethink education, particularly curriculum and instruction with children today and children with disabilities as well. All children. Because we know, and we talked about this before, a group of us, we said we always want to other children with disabilities, want to give them other curriculum, other guidelines, other things. And these othering is not to elevate, really. They're just to other in a negative way. Like, you gonna give me a different curriculum, it better be better than the first. So, how do we take these five and consider these five pursuits for learning with the children we serve? And this would sort of be like the baseline for our Q&A and our conversations we'll have. So, the first is helping children to know themselves and see themselves. That's identity. How does our curriculum and instruction help children to learn something about who they are, who they're not, and who they are destined to be? How are we also with identity teaching about diverse lives and diverse cultures? And not just thinking about identity as race, class, or gender, but identities, if we said, who are you, who are you, who are you, 100 times, and you answered differently, that speaks to the wealth of who we are and who our children are. So we know that identity has different categories, different manifestations. And the second pursuit for learning is, how are we teaching the skills and standards that our students need? And if the skills are not rigorous enough, how are we elevating them? Because I do have to rewrite some of the Common Core standards. They are not written as well in some areas as I would like. And as we're teaching skills, let's help students to become smarter about something: new people, places, things, topics, themes, current events, histories, intellectualism. See, we always want to teach new knowledge. Teachers would work with children, and I would say, well, what did the child become smarter about? They'll say fluency, decoding, vocabulary. Those are all skills. What did they learn about the world? That's knowledge, that's intellect. And the difference between knowledge and intellect is knowledge stays in your mind. Intellect is when you do something with it. And I don't mean take a test. You actually do something in the world with it. That's what we want our children to do: take their learning and do something in the world, in their communities. The fourth pursuit is criticality, teaching children about social justice and anti-oppression, anti-racism, anti-classism, anti-homophobia, anti-ageism, you name it, Islamophobia, religious discrimination. Anything that inflicts hurt, pain, and harm to the environment, to the self, or to others. We're teaching them consciousness and equity. And then finally, we're teaching joy. We're teaching students how to recognize and see beauty in themselves and in the world around them. See, it has a great balance to criticality, because you do not get joy without justice. Imagine if somebody is making your world terrible. How can you fully experience and embrace joy with that? So they have a beautiful relationship. And if you notice, the ancestors in these literary societies called these goals pursuits. They did not call them standards or goals. Just let that sit with you. And if it comes up in our conversation, it comes up. But they did not call it a learning standard. They called it a learning pursuit. I want you to think about the difference. And as I wrap up in the last 2 minutes, I am starting to take these five pursuits and ask different assessment questions prior to my teaching. I'm asking children questions like, do you feel loved and valued at our school? What is one talent that a teacher did not recognize in the past? How would you describe yourself to someone who did not know you already? See, we're collecting this data, then we're giving it to children. We're giving it to the teachers, and then they have to create the dress or curriculum and instruction that's reflective and responsive to who students are. We're asking children, like, how do you learn best? And when learning something new, what helps you? They'll tell you. One group of children said, oh, we need models, examples, step-by-step guide, visual. They gave us the whole pedagogical plan. We asked children across the nation questions like, do you feel our learning is connected to real life? Because some students say, why are we learning this? I don't see this being useful. Listen to them. They might be telling the truth. Do you feel safe and empowered at our school? Do you feel everyone is treated equally in the world? If not, we need criticality, right? We also asked them, how's your joy? How's your joy today? Do you experience joy in our class? Do I show up as a teacher having joy? How important is joy to you, and how can we make learning more joyful? You can take any of these questions and ask your students, and then just sit on the assessment data. What did you learn about them? And I want to show two examples, and then we'll open it up for some Q&A, just so you know what it looks like in action. And these are examples we taught with real students. And the second example, you'll actually have a video of the students, so you can see the learning happening. You can see the children learning the goals. See, my 20 minutes is up. I'm going to go 2 minutes over. So this was an example of teaching the book Buzzing with Questions about an American scientist and zoologist, Charles Henry Turner. Now, he asked a lot of questions, particularly about bees and insects. So we asked children, what do you want to learn more about? Even asking children that question is tapping into their inquisitive identity. We asked them to write out 5 hypotheses or even just questions that they have about the world. And it's a skill development because we check punctuation, grammar, sentence structure. This particular group of students were learning how to write complete thoughts and complete sentences. We asked them, who is Charles Henry Turner? For intellect, it's just knowledge of a new person. Why do we need to learn about scientists of color? Inclusion, access, representation. And what gives you joy and happiness when you learn about it? And then some of the teachers took some of those examples from pursuit number 5 and used it to build a new lesson plan based on what they wanted to learn about. We'll do learning around your interests. And in an example that you're going to get a video of, this was in Harlem, New York. A few months ago, I taught this. We recorded it professionally. I started this unit in a 4th grade class and said, if you can build and design something in your community that will elevate it, that will advance it, that will improve it in any kind of way, what would you build? This was a unit about architecture and design. And I gave each group of children index cards, tape. Wait till you see these clips. The children went at it in their building. They had blueprint paper. They designed what they wanted to build, and then they built it. Now, the skills are still the same skills and standards out of New York City. I taught them how to have collaborative discussions, work with diverse partners. This is also something you need to learn in life. They learned what is architecture. That was a new term for them. And who is Zaha Hadid? I taught about architecture through the life of Building Zaha. She was the first woman to receive the highest architectural prize. But I taught them how people of color and women have been discriminated against in architecture. I showed them architects from all over the world and their designs, and they had to hold up a red card if they found it aesthetically pleasing to the eye. They had to hold up a green card. A green card if it's aesthetically pleasing, a red card if they didn't find it aesthetically pleasing. I mean, that's fair. And then a yellow card if they found it okay. That was their joy, how to recognize aesthetics in your own eyes and your own perspectives. And I would show the pyramids, and some students held up the red card. They just didn't find it that creative. It's pretty cool that they're still standing, but they wanted curve and design and aesthetics. But I love that they're starting to recognize that as 4th graders. And when I asked, what would you build? One group built a slime museum. They said, we need a slime museum in Harlem. That's fair. Another group built a mansion. They said we need more space in our homes. That's also fair. And they also built a birthday cake statue. They said, when is your birthday? You will come to the park and the birthday cake will sing to you. And another group built a tunnel to leave the school. I said, that's really for the teachers. But look at their creativity. Look at all the things that I was doing intentionally in a unit plan like this. And when I assess them, and when we assess the students we work with our different populations, we know that assessment is stronger when students are involved. So they had some choices on how to be assessed. Multiple and differentiated multimodal assessment gives them different opportunities for success. A lot of times when we assess our children, we give them one quiz, one test. They have no other opportunity. What about if they have anxiety? They have no other opportunity to showcase their genius, their talents. So we know that strong assessments are where grades are de-emphasized, but progress and the art and the joy of learning is emphasized. It's when it is reliable, it's multidisciplinary, it's multimodal. Maybe you have to act it out. You don't always have to write it out. I didn't grade their drafts because they're just their thoughts. I usually grade their final assignments, but assessment is also ongoing, is telling, it helps us. It's also very creative. So in my Zaha Hadid example, I had their index card structures was an assessment, what they built and their blueprints. I had worksheets, I had exit tickets, I did have a quiz. I had comprehension questions, discussion, and you can't see for Joy, sorry, it's cut off, but they're holding up the red, the yellow, the green cards. That was the assessment if they held up a card. See, assessment can be that easy because to assess means to gather information of how students are experiencing the learning. And the goal of all of this is to give them a new dress, a new type of experience for learning, one that is not just focused on cognition or skills alone, but skills in the context of my life, of identity, of the world, of intellect, of justice, of criticality, and finally, of course, of joy. So that's my quick presentation, you all. I think that's enough to get us talking. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and just kind of open it up to questions, thoughts, reactions, ideas. And if you can add to the chat, I'll kind of moderate it a bit. And let's just see what your thoughts are and how we can have conversations around this work. Thank you.
Thank you, Goldie, for sharing the work. And it just to me, I'll start us off. To me, the when you go into classrooms and you're working with students and thinking about it, and a lot of times the question comes up around how do you include students with disabilities in the classroom with the curriculum and with the assessments and evaluations, and how do they access, and this whole conversation that we had about other, how do they access this information. And I'm thinking about the unit that you taught, and I'm thinking about how easy that access would look like for all learners, because of the fact that you're connecting with their context, and thinking about more than just the words on the page, but more about like how do they interact with the information, and how do they build that knowledge. So I can immediately, my mind went to, there are so many ways that I can think about that I would not as a teacher need to adapt for a student, because of the reason that all the ways that you presented it would allow for the students to be fully engaged regardless of if they had a disability or not. And I was wondering about the classroom that you were in, about the makeup of it, again, just to get an idea about who the students were in that class.
And we did, thank you for that. You said so many important points. And we did have students with disabilities in that class. It was a very diverse class in many ways when it comes to um, who they are, race, culture, ability, all of that. And I got to tell you, when I look and when I was educating all the students in that one sort of experience activity of building, um, there was a couple students with disabilities who took the creative lead on that. You never know what is needed to make your gifts shine. And so that's why we have to plan for joy, have joy in our methods, have joy in our pursuits. We have to have it. And when we think, it's something else you said that reminded me of access. Even some of those questions I showed to the assessment, the pre-assessment questions prior to instruction, we also can change up and modify assessments. If you have some students who cannot answer the questions on a survey or a Google form, okay, ask them. It's not how they take it, it's how you're receiving and understanding their information and their knowledge. So with some of them, some of the questions, we asked some on survey, virtual survey, print survey. We asked parents to get the answer from their child. We did focus groups. So, but we sometimes just say so fixated on one way of access and look at all we might miss out when we do that. So thank you for both of those points. So others,
I
if
can go.
yeah, hi Lauren.
Hi. In special ed, in so many places, we talk about kids as their disability,
Mhm.
and kids talk about themselves as their disability because they've heard it so often.
Mm,
And I think one of the simplest things to shift for adults is to ask them to focus on language as
mm,
opposed to calling that kid sped, or sometimes they even call them like a 50, meaning the IQ score.
mm.
It's horrific. Um, and so I think one of the simpler ways to shift practice is to focus on language. And I really appreciate you talking about language. I think you don't have to really get it to do that action, so, and just it's a good step, I think, for adults to take, to think
Mhm.
about their language. And
Yeah.
I was also thinking about what you said around joy. I taught kids when I was a teacher who didn't know how to read, and they were middle schoolers. And basically, at the third grade, people have just stopped teaching them how to read. It's like, all right, you're done. You can't read. You have a disability. It's over. And
Mm,
we didn't do that. We taught them to read. But I had this one child. He was a middle schooler, and I was very careful to treat him with respect.
mm,
And he couldn't read, and he said, I want to read Malcolm X. And I
mm,
said, okay. And I said, how about this? How about I read Malcolm X to you, and you read, oh, he said, you want to read these stupid baby words. I'm like, I get it, but let's do both. And that kid in middle school went from a non-reader to a fourth grade reader.
mm.
And then in high school, dropped out because they stopped teaching him again. And, things happen. But I just really appreciate you talking about language, and you talk about tapping into the children's genius in order to help them in any way possible. So this child who wanted me to read him or wanted to read Malcolm X, we read that whole book, and then he played Malcolm X in the school play. I mean, so he was the star of the entire school.
Mm.
And so I'm just remembering a lot of I feel like I see a lot of the negative things now, but your talk is reminding me of a lot of the beautiful things that happen as well. So thank
Yeah.
you for that.
No, you always say, I learned so much from you. So thank you for being my teacher too. You always say so much around the centering of love. Language is a manifestation of culture. And a lot of times, students' language is taken away, stripped away. Don't talk like that. Don't be like that. Or when students speak other languages than English, we think that, oh, you cannot speak other languages besides English in this classroom, as if it's going to stifle other language. No language will stifle another language. It'll only elevate the understanding
Mm-hmm.
of language. And the what you said about your student, it reminded me, because working and helping to train and prepare teachers who are being reading specialists, oftentimes they focus on one type of identity, their reading identity. Oh, you're at this reading level, so all the books have to be. So you might have an older child who say, I want to read Malcolm because my developmental,
Mm-hmm.
identity, my age is more Malcolm. One teacher was putting like the Bernstein Bears in front of a 16-year-old. And I'm like, you think that you are responding to their reading identity, but that's a problem. because the child is going to check out and feel some kind of way, like we would as adults. If somebody said, oh, well, you know, you're capable of here, your criticality, your identity is here, and even though your skills might be a little lower, you still have to think about my multiple identities when you're selecting books and strategies for me. And so it made me think of what you said with the child, and we never know who they are destined to be, you all. We have students who struggle academically, and they become the best among us. I mean, I can give you my own story of struggle. I was not like seen. I mean, I had the best endurance, and the spirit of me was one of the best. But, you know, I struggled academically. And so we never know who they can become. They can be the next Malcolm X. They can be the next advocate and freedom fighter. Again, we have to believe in their genius.
Just while we're waiting for somebody, one quick thing. Ruchika and I were in a school district not too long ago, and we walked into a class of kids who were 18 to 21, and they had them singing the Wheels on the Bus. And we had to leave that class because we were so upset that they were doing that to these adults. So yeah, we do that, bring them down to a skill level that's just not fair. But anyway, I'll let somebody else talk.
One of the things I've kind of taken out of it, and when you think about the whole the context of language, I think it's important that we truly have an emphasis on culturally responsive teaching that transcends race and ethnicities. Because a lot of times when people talk about cultural responsiveness, that's the first thing that they talk about. But if you talk about certain disability groups, you know, there are cultures within cultures. I'm reminded of students um, who uh, participate in deaf education programs,
Mm-hmm.
students who use sign language. You know, there's a distinct culture there, and they really take ownership of that. And many times, as educators, we fail to kind of identify with some of the things that students are trying to relay through their unique culture. And I think it's important to kind of say, in terms of communication, language, speech, and all types of communication, that it's important to make sure that there is that cultural responsiveness as educators, so that we not only identify with the students, but the students have an opportunity to identify with each other. So you brought out some very great points, and I like the fact that you did kind of speak to the fact that it's not necessarily just race,
Mm-hmm.
but when we talk about race and ethnicity, a lot of times that is kind of like the bookmark in terms of culture. But within our school systems, there are these little micro cultures that spring up all over the place. And it's being able to help students identify within their own cultures, but also to identify to see how that culture is a part of a larger culture in terms of the teaching and learning process, or
Yes.
this ecosystem that we could say is educational. Um,
Yes.
so those are my thoughts.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. It's just a spot on. And, you know, we can't even make those assumptions and stereotypes just because you look this way, your name might look this way, that you are this way. And the first thing we do in the classrooms is we get to know our students' names, their language, as Lauren said. We get to know their cultures, the different manifestations of cultures, and then their other identities that are not in the cultural realm, but it still makes up who they are, because we cannot teach, of course, who we don't know. And we cannot really teach, it's going to this question. Carrie has a great question in the chat. Or I'm sorry, S. Lucas first, that these strategies bring out the genius of so many of our students. But for many of our teachers, it's not so easy. And we have to say that out loud. It is not so easy. In 5 minutes of a school day, it could be like 500 different events happen that will influence 160 seconds. And the things that we are making up for all sorts of adults that before us in that moment, right? And then we're also competing sometimes with society and social media and all the things. And so nothing is easy for a teacher. But you're asking, how do we support ourselves and other educators to interrogate practices and mindset? So I have to say, first, sis, it starts with the leadership. The leadership should be space creators for teachers to have joy when they go into that classroom. Make sure teachers are rested, make sure they get water and bathroom breaks. Because see, if we're not well, how are we going to be for students and for youth? But how are we, if it's up to me, I always say that teachers would not teach full days. They would teach half the day, cultivate their genius, interrogate practices and mindset the half of the day. It is almost the way our system is set up. It's almost impossible to talk about these ideas of genius, justice, and joy because the system is not really designed to nurture it or to even be in support of it. It's really designed for test prep and for teach this lesson is not really designed for culturally responsiveness. So given what we have, what I see is having teachers have leaders create spaces for teachers to just talk about their rest, their healing, their joy, to have spaces like, let's interrogate our curriculum. Let's do an evaluation of it. Let's see what's strong about it, what's not going to work. Let's use some of our PD time to create together, to design together some learning opportunities. Let's bring in partners differently. This morning I was on a hearing for advocacy for a child. If you call me as a partner, I am likely to show up. How can in LA they asked if I could be a scholar in residence where I can take a leave from my university. I couldn't do it at the time, but what a great idea, right? Where you can do the research and the work. Is some of the heaviness is lifted up. In Detroit, they are rewriting their curriculum to be in alignment with the 5 pursuits. They're not waiting on a new publishing company. They're saying, you know what, we're going to get the right partners with us to do the work. So, and then we start questioning ourselves. What's our genius? Who am I? What's my consciousness? We start to do the self-work. And in my book, I have a whole chapter on the self. And I started with the self because we have to, like you're suggesting, interrogate the mindsets. Which are the ways of thinking that's working, that's not working, that's not elevating our children? So those are some of my first thoughts to that question. It's a beautiful question. Thank you. And I think we have one more question in the chat if I can get to it, and then we'll see where we are if it's time to close with some joy. So Carrie is saying, I love your assessment ideas. How you use these types of assessments to illustrate to district and state level leaders, like superintendent, school board members, departments of ed, that children are learning, especially when standardized tests are being prioritized. So great question. So we have to understand the standards are going to dictate, the curriculum is going to dictate the test. If the standards are a little jacked up and raggedy or not uneven, we can call them all kinds of things, incomplete. We can argue that the assessment will be incomplete. Now, we know that our standardized tests are quantitative measures. There's always something the numbers will not tell us alone. If you said, the nation's report card said that 15% of Black fourth graders are proficient or above in mathematics. Those are real numbers. In 2022, they reported this. We think, oh, only 15% of our students are on level. I report the same statistics as we have failed 85% of Black children. I report those numbers as we're only responding and meeting the needs and we're only being responsive to 15% of students. See, one has the responsibility on us as a system, as structures. One has the responsibility of students. And so these tests don't tell us everything. Why are we only at 15% in 2023? So we have to take qualitative measures, number one. And if anything, Carrie, show them the joy data. They're not used to seeing it. It might blow their minds. You know, we don't bring superintendents in school. I've been a school board president. We don't train school board members, right, to think about what should matter. So a lot of people just know what they know. Test scores, reading levels. That's what they've been trained. That's what they grew up learning. That's what was instilled inside of them. We have to normalize. We have to give them a new norm. That even though that their skills might be low, their criticality and identity and joy are high, we're going to use that as a way to develop their skills more. See, we have to have certain conversations. We have to be at the school board meetings. We have to illustrate different kinds of data, qualitative data, different data that they have never seen before. And we have to show them what new ways can look and feel like. What this model is doing in many ways is disrupting how we have taught children since the 1600s. And so you think that folks are just going to understand it? Mm-mm. 1600s, 2023. That's a long gap in between. So we have to start using different language. We have to start modeling and showing. If I can just take a moment to show this example, here are the 5 pursuits. This was the data. And we have schools, you all. If you take Lemon Grove outside of San Diego, they not only did all of this, they changed their whole curriculum with this model. They trained everybody from leaders on, and then they looked at their reading score data. Their reading levels and data with children of color have finally showed an increase. Never, ever. This is the first time in the history. So, you know, we have to have the right leadership. We have to do things differently. And even if you have data just with your class, show it. Just with your school, show it. And it's funny, I'll close with this and I'll close with some joy. I just did a big keynote of over 8,000 people, and I invited it was local to my first school principal. And I invited her. And I said, you know, she reminded me, she says, you know, when you were a first year teacher, you didn't wait for anybody. Every time you came into my office, you had a proposal in your hand. You had data to show of your small 6th grade class. And I would create these programs. I knew our students were talented and had gifts and genius, even as a 21-year-old, even when nobody taught me to believe in children this way. You must be that for them. And every staff meeting, I would stand up and advocate for them. And they would say, some of my colleagues would say, like, she better sit her A down. They would say all kind of negative stuff. And I never sat down. And you know, sometimes we need that person, that leader, to be persistent. And what happened over the course of the year? People started to talk differently about our children. People started to think differently about the approaches of our children. So we have to sometimes stand as leaders. If it don't feel right, it ain't right for our children. If you are not brave enough to speak, get the person who's ready. People call on me all the time because I'm ready. I'm ready in many ways to go for broke, to tell the truth. And I'm in a position where I can tell the truth a little bit more than, like, you know, somebody who may feel like their job is at stake. So think about all those things, collect the data, show it, share it, small and large. That is a good step. It feels small, but it's still a step in the right direction. All right, you all. That sounds good. Makes sense? All right. So I'm going to close with joy, if that's okay. And if all that makes sense, you can just also add to the chat. Makes sense. That's all that is assessments for me. But I asked you all, I want to end with you all's beautiful words. We asked you, what is joy? Now, one of you wrote a thesis, and I had to put it because it was so good. I'm going to send you all this so you don't have to read it all. But just take a moment. When I asked you all to define joy, you said something more than just celebrations, parties, and happiness. It felt like a sustained happiness. Like joy seemed like nothing can break it kind of happiness. But you talked about is when you have happiness and pride. when you know who you are and what you're doing. Joy is when you know who you are. Think about that for a child. Joy is freedom, is a feeling of peace, of love. Have you ever felt free? Have you ever felt free to be yourself, live out who you are supposed to be? That's joy, according to you. It is the ingredient in the recipe for establishing a beloved community. How can you get together in book clubs and staff meetings if there's no joy first? That's what this person's saying. Joy is advocacy, joy is purpose, joy is love, joy is having the ability to freely exist without fear of, oh, I'm going to get fired if I tell the truth, without fear of constraints imposed by folks that do not love all of us, or that has been like the dominant privileged community. Joy is grace, somebody is saying, inner peace. Joy is when you have a holistic education and inclusive learning and opportunities and pride and recognizing and celebrating individual. Y'all know who you know who you are when you wrote this. Recognizing and fostering strengths, heritage. And we have fair and inclusive assessments. When you have equity, you don't have joy without equity. When you can just be without judgments. And you all, I love it because that's what Pharrell Williams, who wrote the foreword of my book, he's an artist. He writes songs about joy. He says for him, joy is uninhibited, undistracted, euphoric. It means living free to define who you are for yourself. See, when you have joy, you can be your best self. When children struggle, they may not have joy. If I don't feel safe, if I don't feel free, I know this was my first year doctoral. I cannot be my best self because I did not feel that. When I started to feel free, that's when I started to blossom. I didn't say anything in my doctoral program. As much as I talk now, if you could imagine, I did not say a word. So I saw this picture of this polar bear resting in the field of flowers. And I know we need rest, you all. So I want you to think about your rest when you're thinking about joy. Every day when you wake up as an educator, I want you to ask yourself, how's your joy? It is joy that gives us the energy to keep going. Valerie Kaur says, joy returns us to everything beautiful and good in the world, what's worth fighting for. It is joy that gives us the energy to keep going in the hardships, watching wars and pains and oppression in the world. So check in on your joy. Start to create habits of how to reclaim your joy when folks take it away, or when you take it away from yourself. And just know that you're deserving of joy and all the things beautiful. And so are our children. So with that, you all, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for what you do for our children, for our students, for our communities. Thank you for showing up every day and giving it your all, even when your joy and your heart feels a little deflated. Know that, if we tried our best, that's enough. And we're going to go to sleep and try our best again. We're going to try again and try again. And we're going to keep telling the truth in kindness and in love, because our children, we are sometimes the voices when they're not around to advocate for themselves. When their language or their minds are not quite developed fully, they need us. They rely on us. So we need to be the joy for them always. So thank you again for this beautiful time together. And I hope you had one joyful takeaway. And if so, you can add it to the chat. Thank you. And I'll turn it back over to our organizers.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Mohammed. I'm seeing a lot of people in the chat talking about giving their thanks and sharing. how much they enjoyed listening to you, but also kind of are leaving inspired and full of joy, like Yalda says. So thank you for your time, for your work, for coming and joining us and reminding us all to go back and find our joy, and to keep going back to doing that, and bringing it forward to our students, so that they can experience joy in their lives and their learning. Anyone else want to say anything just before we leave and sign off?
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. All right, with that, we'll close today's Collab Talk. We look forward to seeing you all again. Dr. Muhammad, you're welcome to join us at any time and help us to keep reminding us about the things that are important. And everybody, we look forward to seeing you all in Portland, Oregon. We look forward to having you join us for other Collab Talks that we have monthly, and professional learning opportunities that we have and share with you. And if you don't get the information, let us know and we'll reach out to you.